I want a divorce. I found someone who actually makes me happy. That was the text that appeared on my phone while I sat at my desk, staring at a wall of numbers and graphs on my monitor. My name is Nathan Bell. I'm 45 years old, a financial systems analyst at Orbis Union in Richmond, Virginia. It was a Wednesday morning, the kind of day where nothing felt out of place. I was triple-checking a client's fraud detection algorithms, sipping lukewarm coffee, focused on work. My wife, Dana, was supposed to be at a marketing conference in Dallas for 3 days. Routine, she'd said. Standard corporate networking. But that text shattered routine. Before I could even process the first message, the phone buzzed again. I've already transferred the retirement funds to my private account. You can keep the house. I don't need it anymore. I set the coffee down carefully, almost mechanically, as if one wrong move might tip the world off its fragile balance. My pulse quickened, but my hand was steady. Years of training in risk management had conditioned me to react to panic with process. I opened my banking app. The numbers glared back at me. Something was already wrong, just not in the way Dana thought. I typed a single reply. I hope you're happy. 7 words. No pleading, no outrage, no anger spilling across the screen. Just a flat, quiet acknowledgement. Then, I got to work. For the next hour, I sat in front of my computer, watching line items flicker and update across 3 different dashboards. Every joint account we had ran through consolidated monitoring, a system I designed myself. Dana had never fully understood the depth of what I did for a living. She thought financial systems analyst meant I stare at spreadsheets. In reality, it meant I built safety nets for banks, invisible tripwires that caught fraud before it could drain lives. She didn't realize that our marriage finances lived inside that same net. Retirement funds, investment portfolios, emergency savings, even the private checking account she thought was hers alone. Every penny passed through systems I'd woven together. So when she initiated those transfers, the system didn't hesitate. It didn't care about betrayal, or vows, or love gone sour. It didn't care that my wife was running away with someone else. It only saw a red flag, 6 figures shifting between accounts without the proper 2-party verification. To the system, Dana wasn't a wife. She was a potential fraudster. By noon, my phone lit up with alerts. Not from Dana, but from the receiving institution. A cold, efficient message blinked across my screen. Account review initiated. Deposits frozen, pending investigation. The alert blinked across my screen like a quiet verdict. I didn't smile. I didn't pump my fist in victory. There was no satisfaction, no celebration, just a calm acknowledgement. I closed the window and went back to work. Another client's financial security needed my attention. That was my job. Dana's phone, though, that was about to start buzzing. She tried to log into her account, expecting to see a balance fat with stolen security. Instead, she'd seen nothing, frozen, untouchable. The system had no sympathy for bad decisions. I'd learned that lesson the hard way years ago, watching ordinary families panic when their accounts froze during fraud investigations. Tears didn't matter. Pleading didn't matter. Love, betrayal, timing, money never cared. It just followed the rules. And Dana, for all her charm and confidence, had broken every single one. We'd been married for 22 years. High school sweethearts from Petersburg. Back then, I was already the numbers guy, tracking strike rates for the baseball team, balancing our senior class fundraiser to the penny. Dana was the social butterfly, exactly what a marketing professional was supposed to be. She was magnetic, persuasive, the kind of person who could make a stranger feel like a lifelong friend after 5 minutes of conversation. It worked for a long time. She charmed the world, and I made sure the foundation beneath us was stable. She'd laugh when I triple-checked our tax returns. "You're too careful with money, Nathan," she'd tease. "Someone has to be," I'd reply. It was a rhythm. She brought an opportunity, and I made sure nothing slipped through the cracks. But somewhere along the way, the rhythm changed. The warning signs didn't crash into me like a storm. They came quietly, like mist settling over still water, so slowly you barely notice until you're surrounded. 6 months ago, Dana stopped asking about retirement projections, something she'd always been eager to discuss. 3 months ago, a new credit card appeared, one I hadn't approved or even heard about. 2 weeks ago, she walked past the guest room, glanced inside, and said almost casually, "This space is too cluttered. Who comes to visit anymore anyway?" I brushed it off, like I always did. Told myself she was just tired, maybe overworked. But my sister saw it clearly at Thanksgiving. "She seems distant," she said quietly while Dana was in the kitchen. "Just work stress," I told her. "She's traveling more these days. Conferences, seminars. It's nothing." I wanted to believe that. God, I needed to believe that. But looking back now, the mist wasn't hiding anything temporary. It was warning me of the ground disappearing beneath my feet. Dana wasn't stressed. She was planning. I had assumed her distance was from work pressure, but in reality, she was quietly building her escape route. The financial tracking system I created years ago had become a kind of invisible guard in our lives. I first designed it after a client lost millions due to a failed audit. Since then, it had been my habit to connect every account, monitor every transfer, and track every suspicious movement. Not because I didn't trust Dana, but because years of catching fraud had made me cautious. Money always moves differently when someone doesn't want it traced, and I'd spent my life learning how to spot that movement before anyone else. Dana had been watching, too. She studied me at work, asked questions that seemed harmless, and tried to learn just enough to think she'd spotted weaknesses. What she didn't realize was simple. My system didn't have weaknesses. I can still see it clearly. That moment the night before her Dallas conference. We were having dinner. She leaned back in her chair, swirling her glass of wine like she always did when she was trying to sound casual, and asked, "So, how much do we have total?" Without hesitation, fork still halfway to my mouth, I answered, "About 800,000 between us." Then I paused. "Why?" She smiled faintly. "Just curious." At the time, I let slide. But now it was crystal clear. That wasn't curiosity. That was calculation. She was building her exit strategy down to the exact dollar. Later that evening, I sat alone in the kitchen, phone in hand, staring at her last message. For a moment, I thought about calling her mother. Maybe her best friend, Patricia. Even my own parents. But the words sounded insane in my head. "Your daughter tried to steal our retirement savings and got caught by a fraud detection system." It was the kind of line you'd expect in a bad soap opera, not in real life. So instead, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I cooked myself dinner. I cleaned the dishes. I poured a drink. Then I turned on the evening news, letting the anchor's voice drone in the background as I refreshed the alerts one more time. What she forgot, what she never truly understood after 22 years of marriage, was that I didn't overlook details. Not at work. Not at home. Not ever. The call came Friday morning at exactly 11:30. "Nathan, my card's not working." Her voice carried that sharp edge I knew too well. I'd heard it on conference calls when her presentations went off track, controlled panic disguised as mild irritation. "What's your balance?" I asked evenly. "Zero." "How is it zero?" "I transferred." She stopped herself. The sound of her breathing filled the silence between us. Then, flatly, "What did you do?" "Nothing," I said, and for once it was the truth. The fraud detection system flagged unusual transfers from protected retirement accounts. Federal regulations require review for large withdrawals without joint authorization. More silence. A heavy kind, the kind where you could almost hear her mind racing. Finally, "How long?" 5 to 7 business days. Maybe longer if they find issues. There was no reply this time. Just a sudden, clipped into the call. I leaned back in my chair in the home office, the fraud alerts glowing faintly on my screen, and took a slow sip of coffee. Something inside me had shifted. It wasn't anger, not exactly. And it wasn't pure betrayal either. What I felt was clarity. For 22 years, I had protected our future. I'd saved carefully, invested wisely, and built safeguards into our finances the way a fortress is built stone by stone. Every decision, every system, every line of code and protocol had been designed to keep us safe. For her. For us. And she had tried to take all of it with a few clicks. The part that stung wasn't the money. No, money could be rebuilt, earned again, invested again. What cut deepest was the efficiency of her betrayal. No conversation. No explanation. Just a text message, a transfer, and a plan to disappear. Like she was closing a business deal. I pulled up our full investment portfolio. The numbers stared back at me, steady and untouched. Without Dana's transfers, our retirement accounts remained intact. The house we bought for $300,000 was now worth nearly $500,000. My modest stock portfolio and the savings bonds, all still there, protected by the very systems I'd built years ago when she claimed she was too busy traveling for networking events. By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed nonstop. 23 messages from Dana piled up one after the other. I didn't read a single one. What was there to discuss? The silence between us said everything. The divorce lawyer I consulted on Saturday was sympathetic but brutally direct. File now. Document everything. The attempted financial misconduct will work in your favor. By Monday morning, the papers were filed. I kept them simple. No alimony requests. No demands for half of what wasn't touched. Just divorce. The house stayed in my name. I hadn't touched our joint checking account, so I left it alone, all $3,000 of it. Dana could have that. It was a small concession compared to what she'd tried to take. By Tuesday, the reality of it all settled in. I wasn't vengeful by nature. Never had been. But I also wasn't naive. The same systems I'd built to protect clients at Orbit Union had ended up protecting me. Algorithms don't care about vows or anniversaries. They don't care about whispered promises under an altar. They care about patterns, authorization, compliance. And Dana had tripped every wire, violated every rule, all while thinking she was being clever. I went back to work, ate lunch at my desk, reviewed fraud cases. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was investigating strangers for the same kind of betrayal I'd just lived through at home. That weekend, I started dismantling the traces of our life together. Not with rage, just with quiet practicality. I cleared out the guest room she'd always complained about, donated her stack of outdated self-help books, boxed up the photos that once hung in the hallway. The life I'd known had ended with a single text message, but the systems I'd built had endured. Sometimes the best defenses are the ones you hope you'll never need. Sometimes they save you without you lifting a finger. Then Dana made her move. She hired Patricia Martinez as her attorney. Patricia, who I knew from neighborhood barbecues as the woman always bragging about loopholes and legal workarounds. I should have expected it. The motion they filed was almost laughable. Your husband deliberately orchestrated the account freeze, it read. He used his financial expertise to sabotage marital assets. Reading the accusation, I almost smiled. Dana wasn't just rewriting history. She was trying to weaponize the very expertise that had protected us for decades that I met with my lawyer, William Brooks, at West Hill Legal. He'd been a banker before turning to law, which made him the perfect person to handle a case like this. He read Patricia's motion, leaned back in his chair, and actually chuckled. They're going with misconduct? He shook his head, amused. That's a bold strategy, especially when the fraud alerts are automated, not manual. No human hand can flip that switch. The hearing was set for 2 weeks out. Until then, it was a waiting game. Dana, however, didn't wait quietly. That Sunday night, the house phone rang 17 times before I finally picked up. Nathan, she snapped the moment I answered, her voice sharp with frustration. You need to call the bank. Tell them it was authorized. I'm stranded here. Where's here? I asked. A pause. Phoenix. I'm staying with friends. Phoenix. My voice was steady. That's not Dallas. Silence stretched on the line. Then she muttered, It's complicated. I'm sure it is, I said evenly. Did you call your conference organizer? Or your boss at Valerie? They must be wondering why you're missing from your event. Her tone hardened. Don't start. I'm just asking, Dana. Since you're supposedly at a work event. Click. She hung up. By Monday, the situation had taken another turn. My fraud monitoring systems pinged me with new alerts. Dana had been busy, 3 attempts in 2 days to open credit cards using our joint address. Every single one declined, automatically because of the active fraud investigation. She was caught in a financial vice of her own making. No access to funds, no working credit, travel limited to whatever cash she'd squirreled away. On Tuesday, Patricia called me directly. Her voice carried a carefully measured tone, firm, but a little strained. This is getting messy, Nathan. Your wife needs access to basic living expenses. She has access, I replied calmly. The joint checking account still has $3,000 in it. Untouched. That's hardly reasonable, Patricia pressed. It's exactly what we've always carried for emergencies, I countered. She considered $800,000 reasonable to transfer without discussion. Silence. Then Patricia hung up without another word. By Wednesday, a revelation came from a place I hadn't expected. Alan Murphy, Dana's boss at Valerie, called me directly. His voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. Nathan, I don't mean to pry, but was Dana actually at our Dallas conference? HR has no record of her registration. For a moment, I considered covering for her, spinning some excuse. Old habits die hard.